Hi class, this video is to introduce a speculation or a cause and effect argument. So this is one where you are exploring what caused something or what effects that might have, and you're doing so, of course, by speculating, by guessing. But what's the difference between a guess and an educated guess? Because with speculation, you're having to make an argument about why something might have happened or what might result because of it, which of course is just a guess or a prediction. But you have to convince the reader, the audience, that what you're doing is actually making an educated guess, that your prediction has value or merit. So the question becomes, what can you do to convince the reader that you are making an educated guess? So one thing is solid supporting evidence, that you give facts, statistics, visuals, and that you build a reasonable chain of reasoning. And this is where you can logically appeal to your reader that A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. You can also establish your own ethos, and remember, ethos is an appeal to authority. So giving clues to the reader why they should trust your opinion, or using other people's trusted opinions and incorporating them into your own. Whether you choose to write about causes or effects, you have to establish the existence and significance of the subject. So what the subject is and why it matters, and then convince the readers that the causes and or effects that you are proposing are plausible. In other words, that they make sense, that they could come from what you are talking about. Best avoid the obvious. We know when the ground is wet that it probably rained. So you don't need to really tell us that. You want to give us something that's going to surprise us or that's going to argue for familiar causes and effects, but in new ways and unexpected ways. So with our causes, we are considering the underlying or background causes as well as the immediate or instigating causes. And with our effects, we're considering both short-term and long-term consequence, as well as how one effect may lead to another in a kind of chain reaction. So sometimes the most interesting causes and effects are not the immediate, not the ones that directly relate, but the ones that maybe caused the immediate effect. So the remote effect that caused, or the remote cause that led to the immediate cause, or the remote effect that came from the immediate effect. So we can see this, I made one, it's a chain of causes and effects, talking about the nomination of Donald Trump for president. So that's the situation, is that Trump equals the president. And then I thought about, okay, well, what would be a cause that would lead to Trump becoming president? And I came up with that Republican voters distrust the government and politicians. And so they elect somebody they see as not a regular politician, like Trump. And I thought, okay, well, why would they distrust the government and the politicians? And I went back to the remote cause that Reagan says back in the late 70s, when he's running for president. He says that government is not the solution, but the problem. And that is going to lead to voters distrusting government and politicians, which leads to Trump. And then I said, okay, well, what's an immediate effect of Trump becoming the president? So perhaps the Trump and the Republicans will dramatically trim government programs. So that could be one immediate effect of Trump becoming president. And then I thought, well, what could be a remote effect? So a chain that comes from my immediate effect. Well, one might be voters discover that they actually want government to be a solution and they don't re-elect Donald Trump. Or possibly the cuts trim the deficit and the economy booms and voters re-elect Trump, realize that it was right to trim the government programs. So with either of those two remote effects, I would have to give evidence and argue that they could logically spring from this one, and that that it makes sense and that it's likely to happen. So that's just an introduction to to speculation to cause-effect arguments. They're really fun to make because you are guessing, you're making predictions, and you're exploring deeper consequences and deeper causes, and they require you to think creatively.